Noon. Welcome to Police Welcome to Police Department Public Budget Hearing. I'm joined by my colleagues, Council Hogan, Council Gathers, Council Peniawa, Council Manto, Madam President, myself, and Council Green, Council Allen, Council Scholes. And joined with us today is Chief Cecil. Good to see you, sir. Auditor Maroon is here, and members of the Police Department and the Mayor's Office. Welcome. So, Chief, let's just start with an overview. And okay, yeah. Start with an overview, and then we'll go into questions and all. And who's?
This is Lieutenant Brian Lutz.
Okay, Lieutenant, good to see you.
Welcome,
sir.
Yeah, he puts the budget together, so I like to have him.
Oh, he's your money man?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Yeah. I like money people. Yes.
I move this over, thanks.
I like money. Well,
I don't want you to miss my voice.
So, Chief, Lieutenant, take it away.
All right, thanks very much. You know, it's interesting, I've moved around the chairs at this council table here, and I think that when I retire, I'm going to have to run for one of your offices, because I need to move over there. I don't I'm not sure I want it.
I think we had a chief who did that one time, didn't we? Uh-oh.
Yeah, we had a couple. Yeah.
History class.
So thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm just going to go over some highlights, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty where I know you'll have questions. These are some of the highlights that you may be aware of, you may not. Mayor Walsh authorized this 8th Police Academy. So we are now moving forward with that, with polygraphs, psychological exams, backgrounds, all those different things that get you into the academy. A few weeks ago, we had our intake nights. They're orientation nights where folks come for the first time that have passed the civil service test and are interested in becoming police officers. I will tell you, it's going to be a struggle once again to put double digits on in this academy. We had 2 nights of orientations, 43 people showed up. And just to give you an idea, it was just 2-3 years ago where we would have 5 orientation nights, sometimes 6, and 45 to 50 people would show up each night for a class of about 35. So it's going to be a struggle again to put anywhere near double digits. We're hoping we'll get into double digits. Keep in mind our last 2 academies, as all of you know, were 4 and 11. So we're going to try our best. The struggle doesn't mean we're not going to continue to overlap academies, which is what we're doing. We're no longer waiting for one 6-month academy to get over with before we start another. We're overlapping them by as much as a month or 2 months so that we can have academies going at the same time and push out as many qualified candidates as we can and not leave them on the table for other agencies. So that will continue. On a positive note, the last year saw far fewer retirements than the previous 9 years, and also fewer resignations, which were people resigning to go to other police departments. The year prior to taking over,
Yes. So is that because of the new contract and the way it's, extended out with the increase in the pay and with the educational component? Is that maybe why they're not moving out as fast?
I think that's a big part of it, Counselor. I appreciate the contract. It's certainly a big part of it. I'm not taking any credit for that, even though it happened in the 1 year that I was chief, but I won't take any credit for it. It is in all seriousness, if anything else, it's the contract. Far fewer.
It makes us more competitive, correct?
Sure, it is more competitive, no doubt about it. I mean, we had the year previous to myself taking over, we had 54 officers walk out the door through retirements and resignations. And then this year, we saw 17, which is about our average of 18 to 20. The contract is most likely a big part of that, no doubt about it. Keep in mind, though, again, that 17 that left is still more than we're able to hire, so we'll just have to keep that in mind. We'll do our best. We currently sit at 379 officers on the department. 11 of those 379 are in the academy right now and will be of no use to us for several months still. So the number's even lower than that 379. But we will continue to do those overlapping academies. And speaking of numbers, our cadet program, it's in its second year of the cadet program. There are 15 cadets in that program right now, learning as they go. It's a real job with real money, and all 15 of them are in it, anxious to become police officers. Part of this program is not only academic, but fitness. There's 2 gateways into the police department in New York State. No way around it. You have to pass the physical fitness test, and you have to pass the civil service test. They're learning how to do both of these, so that by the time they reach the age or decide to take the police test, they can take that test and enter our police department, having already been part of our family for a year in this program. This is, again, a program that once it matures, we're going to be able to reach up and pick our own fruit off this tree of folks that are already part of our family. And it will alleviate some of that concern about hiring all the time. Another thing, Liberty Resources. We're into our second year with Liberty Resources. This is, as you know, a program where Liberty Resources trained therapists are now going out and taking calls for people in crisis, PIC calls. That's what we call them now, persons in crisis. They're being dispatched up at 911 in many cases. And again, it's not a great deal of numbers right now, but as it continues to mature, they will begin to take more and more calls off of our plate, actually being dispatched instead of police officers to calls where you don't need us to go, where trained therapists are going and dealing with people in crisis.
Is that listed on your activity indicator, do you know?
It is. It's it is. It's. I don't know about activity and activators, but it's one of our budget items, to the tune of about $300,000, because it comes right out of our budget.
So, Chief, that's in professional services? Is it Liberty Resources? Okay.
And if you have questions about that, Deputy Chief Russin has been the point person for that and is doing a great job. One of the items in the budget as well is for 2 caseworkers, which we're going to hire. They're likely going to be housed over at the county office building, because that's where all those folks are with Department of Social Services. But they're going to be working from us. They're going to have our budget. They're going to work on caseloads of people that are frequently on our radar. And I want to give you an example so you understand what these folks are going to do with caseworkers. 2.5 years ago, I believe it was, we had an individual called the police on a regular basis. In one case, in one 24-hour period, she called 42 times 911. These were the type of calls where we couldn't just say we're not coming. She was claiming that she was going to injure herself or injure others. We had to go on every one of those calls and see what we could do for this person. In many cases, we weren't able to do anything, because when we got there, she was showing no signs of anything. In some cases, we were able to take her to CPAP, but she was out the next day. In this particular case, and it was, again, 2.5 years ago, I went with Liberty Resources myself because I had some experience with this young lady. When I say young lady, she was in her 40s. Liberty Resources went there and hooked her up with therapy and other treatment that she needed, medicines, things that she was lacking, and she, to my knowledge, has not called again and is doing fine now. This is the type of stuff these caseworkers will look at. People that are on our radar on a frequent basis, calling the police, calling for services, they will begin to track these folks and make sure they get the treatment they need. So they not only come off our radar, don't tie up police resources, but also get the help they need. And that is also in our budget for those 2 caseworkers. And I want to mention, too, so even though we're going with those Liberty Resources caseworkers, we haven't pumped the brakes on CIT training, crisis intervention training. These are our frontline officers that are learning crisis intervention training, and I mean this with no facetiousness. They're literally learning training that they've used to pull people off the ledge of buildings from the training they used there. Our target for this, when we took this over a few years ago, Lieutenant Abbott and Sergeant Reardon took over this, became trainers in this event. Before it was held by the county, it was somewhat limited, sometimes once a year, sometimes not once a year. We took it over and we're putting 2 of these classes on per year sometimes, putting our own folks through it and other law enforcement folks through it too. Our goal has always been 20% of our police department trained in this critical training. We currently sit at 26 to 30% trained in this critical training, and we continue to push these classes out. We're also going to be coming in front of you very soon to enter into an agreement with the Syracuse School District to hire, train, and supervise special police officers to place them in elementary and grade schools. These are going to be retired police officers. In some cases, will be retired SROs that are going to be placed in the schools to create an added layer of security and comfort in those schools that currently don't have SROs.
Comes out of your budget?
It's going to, no, the school district is going to reimburse almost every item in there other than weapons. They aren't allowed to buy that, but it will be reimbursed. You may see it in our budget, but it's going to be totally reimbursed at the point by the school district. Also, I know a big concern right now is security at City Hall. We are also beginning the process of hiring SPOs, again, retired police officers, to create that higher level of security at City Hall. Once we put that in place, you will notice it. It will be officers that maybe some of you have engaged with over the course of your careers, because it will be probably officers who have recently retired and have decided to come back to do this job. If you're interested in this, and I know all of you have expressed a concern, I spoke with the mayor yesterday. It's important that you put this back in our budget. I believe it was, I know it was $150,000 to hire these these retired officers to bring them back as SPOs. The mayor is aware that I'm asking this. He's aware it's a concern, and if you want it put in place, that number, that $150,000, would have to be put back in the budget.
Where would those SPOs, they would work here at City Hall and then one Park Place, or?
They would be, right now, they would be here. Park Place, I think, is still in flux as to what we're going to be doing there. They have their own security at the front door, meaning Park Place right now. I'm not sure whether it's going to be CSOs over there or these SPOs. That part of it is not part of this. This is just to put SPOs here. The reason it's probably going to be 3 of them is because they take time off. We got to cover different shifts and things like that.
So that's like a 9 to 5 hours, whatever City Hall operates at?
It would be, but they would also come in when you have public safety meetings where you think there could be some concern.
Well, I think we might want to look at the other place too,
Yeah.
place, since a lot of city personnel will be over there. I mean, this is not only this is a council concern, not only for ourselves, but there's a lot of people, obviously coming to City Hall to deal with the people in here for city personnel, and the same thing over there. So
Okay.
why don't you fellas work on it?
Okay.
Maybe Captain Lutz, is it Captain Lutz or Lieutenant Lutz?
Lieutenant, sir.
Lieutenant? He's the money guy. He should be a captain anyways. What do you think, Chief?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, but that's a good point. We'll look into that as well. The last thing on here is just gun violence. I don't want to stop without mentioning that. We continue to work hard to prevent gun violence, obviously. So far this year, our officers are up 38% in illegal gun seizures from this same time last year. 76 guns taken off the street as opposed to 55 last year, which, by the way, I believe was 42% higher than the year before. We put proactive details on a weekly basis using data from the Crime Analysis Center to focus on the most challenging areas in the city where the gun violence is occurring. And it is all hands on deck. Proactive details are going out. They're being pushed out into the field by patrol, SID, which is our drug unit, CID, which is our investigation unit, traffic, and everyone on the department has a piece of this, and everyone is working very hard. Our main focus, obviously, is on preventing shootings, but it is also very important once they occur to get closure for the grieving families as quickly as possible. Once again, and I mention this at every meeting I go to, our homicide squad, the best in the country, is once again beating the national average, which continues to slip. Some reports, and I looked at them today, show the national average of closures for homicides dipping to the point of 50%. Our SPD's homicide squad is currently at 86% closure for this year and has averaged 83% every single year. We continue to work with Pastor Johnson Kinsey and his outreach efforts because teamwork is the only way we're going to solve this. And I will say this, officers are very good at getting guns, at tamping down problems temporarily when we put numbers out there. But the long-term solution to gun violence is going to come through outreach work, the community, and getting people to not pick up the gun to begin with. And that's everything I have.
So cold cases,
Yes.
do you still have no one working those, or they work them when they can?
So they work, I want to ask Deputy Chief Trudell to just answer that if he's in the back room, because he can give a bit more
Because
specific
there
answer.
are quite a few cold cases still open from like 2004, 5, 6. We still got some cold cases open on those.
Yes, certainly. Rich Trudell, Deputy Chief over at the Police Department. It is not accurate to say that we don't have people assigned. We do not have a dedicated cold case unit, but every cold case has a specific detective assigned to it. We meet with the families of cold case victims regularly. We even assign different detectives to cold cases to get a different look, see if anything that we have missed. So we are doing more with less. We are definitely not just not looking at them. They're definitely assigned. We just don't have a dedicated unit doing it.
Okay. Okay.
While you're up there,
Yes.
can I follow up about the CSOs that we had the conversation with?
Absolutely.
Deputy Chief Shulsky.
So just to bring everybody up to speed, we were looking at a way to compensate our CSOs better so that we can do more with them out on the street, taking calls, alleviating our officers from having to do the lower level type calls. So we were looking at two things, either creating an additional civil service position that would be a step above a CSO that would be paid more and have greater responsibilities, or taking our CSOs and bumping them up in grade and using them out on the street. So I reached out to a couple of our sister cities to see if they had comparable positions, which they do not. I just learned that out this week. So now we're back to meeting with City Hall and personnel and making a decision on which way we want to go, either of those two veins. So we're moving forward on trying to get our CSOs or a different position out there taking lower level calls.
So right now, there's nothing in this budget that
No,
is
not in
working
this
toward
budget.
those.
Yep, not in this budget.
And what is, I don't know if this is you or if this is Lieutenant Lutz, but in the SURA, the police have a code enforcer vacancy. Is that civilian or uniform?
So that would be the code inspector that Jake Dishaw asked for? Yeah, so the commissioner asked for a code enforcement person. Again, it's probably going to be an SPO, retired officer coming back. The reason for him asking that is that we have several people that work with him on a constant basis. When he's going out there, if they're concerned at all, whether they're going to a vacant property, they think somebody might be in there, might come out of there, he's calling us on a frequent basis. So we discussed this, and it would make sense to have an actual retired officer come back, and we would have that. We would staff it. We would take it under our budget, and they would be assigned to code, so he doesn't have to call Matt Malinowski or this person or that person. He would be right in their office and would be able to go out on these things, because they're using us more and more, especially with SEPTED now. When they go out to do an entire revamping of a vacant home or an entire street, they usually want an officer with them the entire time. So now they will with this particular position. And it's brand new. Never been there before.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask, I'm going to ask my few questions so I can get it over with. Okay, first question I have for you, take-home cars. How are we doing with that?
So I don't know if Deputy Shulsky has that number, or but I don't think it's gone up any, but I don't know if it's gone down any. And I don't. Julie's not here. Is Julie back there? No. Oh, she's back
Yep,
there.
she's here.
Julie, if you don't have that number, we can certainly get it to him. I'm not sure if we do.
I don't have the number.
Okay.
Okay, because I'd like to see what those numbers are. And second thing I want to ask you, if you go to page 183, so is this because we no longer have the vice department? Because there were no vice arrests or persons?
Yes, we did away with the vice. Rich, that's true, right? We did away with the vice squad? Yeah, we did away with it.
Okay. And then I'm looking at security details on the same page, and it says not applicable. And I'm trying to figure out why. I know you're doing some security details, right?
Yeah, Brian, I don't know if you know these security details here.
Those are security details that SID would do for like a dignitary. We just didn't have any in the last.
Oh, okay. These are the security details we would do for a dignitary, and we just didn't have any for this time frame.
Okay, so there were no dignitaries.
Yeah,
So you wasn't there, Cho, you're not informed.
yeah.
Okay, and then on page 185, I'm looking at surveys, questionnaires outside. I'm trying to understand that. So it was only one sent out, and what were they for?
Which one? I'm sorry.
The surveys, the questionnaires on the outside, and it says it was one, and I'm trying to understand what were the surveys for?
Rich Trudell, do you happen to know, it's under Intelligence Technology Division. It says surveys, questionnaire, outside. You can look at this if you want, Rich. It has several categories. It might help you refresh your mind. That's right. It's the square down at the very bottom.
Or that interdepartmental surveys? What kind of surveys were they? It just says surveys.
Off the top of my head, it might have been something to do with the schedule, but I'd have to check.
Okay.
I think that's what it was, but I'd have to check.
Okay, and then I want to go back to the police vehicle accidents process. And I'm looking at the actual number, and I'm looking at the anticipated number. So is this down from last year?
I'm sorry, what page are you on?
I'm sorry, 186.
Deputy Chief Schultzke, you're back up. I don't know if you know offhand. Some of these numbers are for the garage.
I apologize, I didn't hear the question.
I said I'm looking at the actual, estimated, and anticipated for the police vehicle accidents process. Is that number about on par, or is that down or up?
Chief Rustin actually has looked into this recently.
See how it's a team effort? It's perfect.
Actions process.
That's about average.
That's about average?
That's correct.
Every year? Okay. All righty, so that's so much for that. But I do want to actually give you guys a compliment, because I think out of every department that's come before us, you were the only ones that actually gave us all of your grants and funding sources. So I appreciate that, because it doesn't make us guess about how much you got in grants. So thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Can I ask an activity indicator question again on page 181? Persons arrested. So do you have a breakdown of appearance tickets versus incarcerated? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the fifth line down.
Yeah, there would be, I'm certain that we could get that for you.
Okay. And also, I noticed the civilian overtime has decreased $82,000, page 191. And the sworn staff has reduced like 1-point-something million. So I just wonder, I think the reduction in overtime for the sworn is due to the 10-hour days now.
No, the reduction's probably, and I'll let Brian answer if he'll correct me if I'm wrong, but the reduction's probably because we haven't moved to the 10-hour day yet, Counselor. We're planning to do that in around Labor Day. But Brian,
So you're asking why the overtime was reduced from the adopted in 23 to the proposed for 24?
Right. Do you anticipate the new contract hours to affect that?
We're hoping it will reduce overtime. It's kind of a wild card at this point. You know, the plan is to start it in September, so we're already going to be 2 months into the fiscal year. So we got 10 months to work with it, and there's a lot of components to it. We still need to conduct a high volume of training. You know, there's still going to be times where we have to pay officers, you know, overtime because they're stuck over on calls, various other reasons. We're hopeful that we can get to that kind of number, but really this first year is going to be kind of a bit of an experiment.
But with the shift, with the way the contract worked out, we should still be covered without a lot of overtime, right?
Well, I don't know, and I didn't mean to pass the hardest question over to Lieutenant Lutz, so I misunderstood your question. So, yeah, so he's exactly right, and you're right, Counselor. The 10-hour day, we are hoping, will limit some of the overtime. We have 10-hour days, which gives us these two, what are called power days each month. During those power days, we're going to be able to do training. A great deal of our overtime is either through training or the backfill, minimum staffing. We pull people off shifts, and we can't just leave shift empty, so we have to put people back on the shift on overtime while we're doing training. These power days put almost 3/4 of our staff on twice a month, and we will be able to use them on straight time while they're working to train them in in-service training and possibly even firearms training, things like that, meaning they're not getting overtime, meaning that number will go down and help us get closer to this budget. There are numerous other things we're doing that is a team effort, but I will be honest, Deputy Chief Russin is kind of the point person for this, where he's limiting the time we're out on calls. We're really aligning ourselves with what the rest of the state agencies do. For the longest time, we used to do over and above. If state did this, if they mandated this, we would do more because we were trying to give a service to the public, and we would always do more in every circumstances. We could do that. We could afford to do that when we had 500 officers. Can't afford to do that anymore. So some of it is pulling back on traffic accidents and various other calls where people can where we either don't respond, or people can do the report online through eServe and other technology, and it limits the amount of time we're on. Consequently, fewer people have to be out on a shift because we're not tied up on calls that someone can just go on a computer and fill out the report for their insurance themselves. So there's a bunch of things in the works, excuse me, to see if we can hit that mark for that overtime, which is limited. And I know Mr. Rudd's chomping at the bit to get up here, but I'll say this final thing. When I met with the mayor and Mr. Rudd and Deputy Mayor Owens, made it clear, and I'll say it here, I don't know if we can hit this. We're going to try our best, but I don't have any idea if we can hit this. The 10-hour day will help us. All these other things we're doing will help us come close. But at the end of the day, when next year rolls around, police work isn't predictable. No one knew that we'd have a January with 3 homicides, including a 10-year-old girl. No one can predict how much time we're going to spend on gunfire, shots fired, homicides, and things like that. So the mayor's aware of this, Deputy Mayor's aware of this, Mr. Rudd's aware of this. All of you should be aware of this. When April rolls around and our overtime budget is spent, we're not going to turn off the tap and stop doing police work.
Chief, I mean, obviously I agree with you because I mean, the lieutenant said that the different schedule doesn't start till after the summer, correct?
Right.
So July and August, and that's typically when a lot of officers with some time take vacation. You know, I mean, we're going to be strapped a little bit. So you're going to have overtime. So I imagine all this overtime, that's when it's going to be front-loaded, that first part of the year, fiscal year.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
Possible, yep.
I don't think we should delude ourselves that you'll be transferring some funds for overtime, actually.
Yep, understood, yeah. No, we should not, certainly don't want to hide the ball. Again, I mentioned it to everybody, including the boss. We don't know what's in the future. We'll try to hit this target, hit this budget. No idea if we can do it.
Tim Rudd, Budget Director. The only thing I would add is the context for all of this, right? So trying to minimize the gap that we had this year between our revenues and expenses, we cut $10 million and said no to a whole bunch of new stuff. So in fairness to the police department, I don't think they requested less money in overtime, but like everyone else, they had to find a cut somewhere. They are the largest department we have and basically a third, and they were a team player, and it basically came primarily from civilian and uniform overtime. And the chief goes through kind of the reasons why there's a rationale for how this is feasible with the new work schedule taking effect for 3/4 of the year, with the sick leave incentive that should reduce some stuff, a bunch of other initiatives. So there's definitely, and then the switch to new electronic timekeeping. So there's a bunch of reasons why it may be achievable. And then there's also, he kind of has gone through this hiring challenges where they are still fully funded for their 423. So if they don't hire, they can wiggle their money between overtime and such. But he has definitely been transparent, and I feel like they've been really great team players trying to achieve it just the same way every other department has. So.
Thank you. Thanks, Jim.
Chief, could we go to page 190? Under temporary services. Could you talk a little bit about those in terms of, especially the seasonal aid, summer aid? What does those entails?
Sorry? Oh, okay. Yes, so you asked about, which one did you ask about, sir?
The seasonal aid and summer aid.
Okay, yes, those are Jimmy Oliver's folks.
Those
that
are Jimmy, okay.
Yes.
Okay. So those are mainly what? High school students or just?
Well, he's hired some folks that, everyone looks like a high school student to me now, but he's hired some folks that I don't think are high school anymore, but they certainly have an eager desire to work for PAL, so I'm not sure if they're all high school students or not.
Okay.
Can I ask a question while you're on that page? Since we're on that page, I'm looking at the automotive crew leader, mechanic, and mechanic helper. Is that going to go into our fleet management?
I don't know. You'd have to ask maybe Corey or someone that I think they've left us alone for now because our garage is working so well. But I don't know. Eventually, I think we're going to get absorbed into that. But so far, we've been left alone.
Okay.
Any vacancies in any of this? I mean, I know about the officer vacancies, but how are the other positions?
I don't know. Brian, are you aware whether we have, or maybe Deputy Chief Schultzke, are you aware if we have vacancies in, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Victor?
The garage and the temporary services? I mean, there definitely are vacancies. I just don't want to give you a wrong number.
She said, let me
It's all you, Victor.
Sure. Yeah, could you?
Sure. Hi, Councilors. Victor Namer, Budget Office.
Hi, Victor.
Hello. So specifically under the crew leaders, the automotive equipment mechanic, and the automotive helper, we're missing one from each right now.
It's one from each, okay.
One from each of those three categories.
And with the accreditation innovation coordinator, is that part of what?
So it's part of, we hired that individual, thanks. We hired that individual to help us with accreditation. CALIA, we're going toward CALIA, accreditation and all those various things. It's very specialized. Just as an example, New York State accreditation, I think there's 127 standards you have to hit every 5 years. So someone needs to track that, someone who's an expert in doing that. And we just did get New York State accredited just last year. That individual did a very superior job in getting us on board with all 127 standards and getting us accredited. But now we're moving toward CALIA accredited, and we need that individual for that.
So I guess it seems like it's going to be something ongoing. Why is it under temporary services?
I don't know. Brian, you know why? It must be.
No, that was...
It's a long day.
So the full-time position is the accreditation manager that's at the top of page 189. That's the person the chief was referring to before. The other position is a temporary position that was held open. It's a part-time position in case we needed to bring in some extra help to get those processes accomplished. It's not necessarily a one-person job, so that's a part-time slot that we can bring somebody in as needed.
Frank Oliva, could you answer that question for me about the facilities? Do you know? Because I'm looking in this same page on 190, and they have like the garage supervisors and the garage manager, and I'm not trying to beat it to death, but do you know if they're going to incorporate that into the fleet management at some point?
What page?
189.
Frank Oliva, the city's chief administrative officer. So the fleet manager doesn't have direct control over the garages. He's got some influence or over the mechanics. So there is some discussion about consolidation of mechanics. It hasn't progressed all that far as I know. Rich Tavessi's job really is kind of overall the fleet and the equipment, and he certainly understands what's going on with the mechanics and does a lot to recruit new mechanics, but they don't report to him. And at this point, there is no definitive plan to combine all the mechanics in the city.
Okay. Thank you.
One more question, Chief. So if you go to 189, information aid there, the very last one, then they say under temporary service, is there a difference? It's two under temporary service and then one on the books.
Not sure. Brian, you want to take that one?
Sure. So the ones on page 189, Counselor, those are full-time positions. The one on page 190 is a part-time position. That's a woman who's assigned in our property division, and they only need that info aid for part of the day. They don't need somebody down there full-time.
Okay. There's an out of title, which zero out for it's on page 191, 510900, and it's all zeroed out. Does that mean that it's no longer valid, and why was it used in the first place?
That was reimbursed.
That's the reimbursement?
Yeah, those are reimbursements.
Okay. Well, that would,
No?
something that it? Good.
That's what it
Is that
is.
when you have to call up somebody that doesn't have the rank of the person that they're subbing for? That's what we learned in the other
That's
budget
what,
hearing for somebody else.
yeah.
Yes.
I mean, in the case of the civilian budget, it's where somebody is doing the work of a higher title, but there's not a valid civil service list or test. So we temporarily pay that person until either a new list comes out or that person is able to test and be promoted. Yep.
Other questions?
Chief, on page 188, professional services line, that one, it went from about 1.1 million to 1.7. Do we know what that's attributable to?
How far down is it?
This is fourth from the bottom on 188, line 541500.
Professional
Some of
services.
it's Liberty Resources, right?
The majority of that, Counselor, there's 300,000 for Liberty Resources and 200,000 for the county workers that the chief mentioned before.
Which is an increase from this budget year.
Neither of those were part of the fiscal 23 budget, correct?
And I'm going to ask a question that I really don't know the answer to, so maybe I know what sick time is, but I'm looking at the sick time buyback. So can you kind of explain that a little bit?
Sure. So the sick time buyback, that's on page 188, that when police officers retire, they can sell back up to 250 hours if they have that in their bank. This is providing for an amount to pay for that. You know, again, assuming somewhere between 18 and 20 retirements a year, this will cover those payouts.
So there's no cap on how much they can comp and put in the bank for buyback?
The bank can be up to, I think it's 1,032 hours. They can only sell back 250.
Oh, okay.
So there is a limit on what they can sell back.
Okay, so they can only sell 250. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Great job, Chief, Chiefs, yeah. Chief Cecil. To you and your command staff and for your leadership and everything. I just want to say that to everybody, so.
We all appreciate it. Absolutely. Understand.
Oh, we get back up to that 473. I remember that one.
That was nice.
Other questions? I want to thank the police department, my colleague here, and everyone that came, and WCNY that will do it for us. Thank you. Have a good day.